Welcome to the Whole Child Sleep podcast, where we help families nurture dreams and raise wholeness. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Whole Child Sleep podcast. I'm your host, Myra Hartzheim, and today is a Q&A week. We are answering a question from Amber, which is related to the topic we discussed last week, which was on the topic of night wakings. So check that podcast out, and we will jump into this question. Amber asks, would a weighted blanket help my daughter sleep? She is 5, and she has only slept through the night 6 times in the last 3 months. She likes to be tucked in super tight, wakes up if she gets untucked, and has a hard time settling to sleep to start with. She wiggles around so much and likes to have weight on her legs to go to sleep. We've tried melatonin per her pediatrician to help her settle, and it worked, but she started sleepwalking. So we stopped that. She comes to our room to sleep and wiggles around for literally hours before going back to sleep and wakes the baby who's also in our bed. So we really need to figure something out soon. Any sleeping advice would be greatly appreciated. All right, Amber, thank you for your question. There are a few factors here. So a weighted blanket may help. I want to emphasize that if a weighted blanket does help, you are, however, still addressing the symptom of the problem because she's having such a difficult time falling asleep in the first place. I want you to look for the possibility of mouth breathing as opposed to nasal breathing, as mouth breathing can cause difficulty falling asleep initially. When you mention how restless she is with her sleep, that brings up 2 things for me. Number 1 is deficiency in iron, as well as possibly magnesium. So I want you to go to your pediatrician and have her evaluated for low ferritin levels, as well as ask your pediatrician if you can help your little one by supplementing with some magnesium. Along with deficiency in iron and magnesium, I always want to encourage families that if your kiddo is deficient in some sort of micronutrient, often what goes along with that or the cause of that is inflammation of the gut. If our gut is inflamed, absorption of essential nutrients can be more difficult. So all this to say, Amber, is that yes, feel free to use a weighted blanket. However, there are quite a few other factors that I would consider here. I encourage you to look into primitive reflex integration, as that will likely help with sensory processing disorder, which is what you're experiencing with her need to feel pressure to fall asleep easily. Reach out to an occupational therapist. I hope that was helpful, Amber. I wish you all the best. I hope you and your kiddos get better sleep soon. We're here for you. Thank you all for listening. I hope that was helpful and informative. Reach out if you have any questions, and I will talk to you all next week. Thank you for listening to the Whole Child Sleep podcast. For references to articles discussed in this podcast or for evidence on the topics that we've discussed on this podcast, please look in the description below, or you can find the articles linked in our blog at curesleep.us. I want to give you an idea of what you can expect in terms of structure of this podcast moving forward. You can expect 1 podcast a week, and we will cover a topic for 2 weeks. The first week, you can expect the podcast to be more educational and informational. The following week will be more of a Q&A covering the same topic. If you have a question that you would like us to answer during the Q&A podcast, please send them in at 406-551-4083. And if you've found this podcast to be helpful, we ask that you share it. We would love to reach more tired families. We also ask that you subscribe and like and give us a 5-star review. This also helps us reach more tired families. We hope you have a beautiful day, and we will talk to you next week. By listening to this podcast, you understand and agree to the following. The content of this podcast offers the opinions of Meyer Hartzheim and her guests, and it is not intended as medical advice. It serves as an informational purpose. For personalized and medical concerns, consult your healthcare professional. The views and opinions in this podcast are our own and don't represent our employees or affiliates. The views of the guests in this podcast are their own and do not necessarily reflect that of Cure Sleep Group. Our podcast and website are not for legal purposes, such as establishing a standard of care or expert witness testimony. We don't guarantee the accuracy of statements or opinions. We appreciate your assistance in maintaining content accuracy. If you find errors in our podcast or blogs, please reach out via email to support@curesleep.us. This podcast is owned by Cure Sleep LLC and presented by the Whole Child Sleep Podcast. Thank you for tuning in.